So I guess we're about ready to go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar of the World Tote Association. This webinar is for our members only, and we're delighted to have more than 50 participants from around the world with us today. In this webinar, our panel will answer some of your questions about marketing to Generation Z. Should be really interesting. So, how do horse racing and betting companies get ready to meet the requirements and needs of Generation Z? How do we transform them into horse racing fans and regular punters? To provide some answers on this topic, the World Tote Association is very excited to have Jeff Fromm here today. Jeff is a partner at Barclay. He's a weekly contributor at Forbes and the author of 4 books, including a very interesting one, Marketing to Gen Z. Jeff will help us understand this digitally educated generation. Gen Z has a real interest in gaming, but are we ready to attract them to horse racing and betting? Jeff has traveled the world sharing his insights. In his travels, he met our second speaker today, Phoebe Siu. Phoebe is the executive manager of customer management at the Hong Kong Jockey Club. She's currently in charge of grooming the new generation of customers and creating the right racing experience for them. She'll explain the specific offer put in place by the Hong Kong Jockey Club, offline and online. Our third speaker today is Dubliner, now living in Los Angeles, Stephen Kennelly. He's the vice president of racing product at FanDuel Group. FanDuel is pretty new on the US market and is seeing phenomenal growth with the legalization of sports betting in many states of the US. Stephen will tell us how they adapt their product and marketing techniques. So at the end of each presentation, at the end of the 3 presentations, we will have a question and answer session. Feel free to share your questions. You can either ask them using your computer's microphone or type them in the question and answer box here on Zoom. The presentations will be sent to you afterwards, and the video of the webinar will be available in about 2 days. So let's go. Jeff, please share your expertise with us.
Thank you very much. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be. Looking forward to talking to you all about this. So for those interested in generations, including Gen Z, I came about this quite innocently. In 2010, I was trying to find information on millennials as consumer, and I went to the Google. I searched the Google high and low, and I found absolutely nothing. So after failing again and again and again to find this information, I call a friend of a friend. She's at the Boston Consulting Group, and I said, hey, how about we study millennials as consumers? I can't find anything on this topic on Google. Oh, by the way, I don't have enough money to do this by myself. Would you pay for half of my research? Pause. Full stop, quiet. She says, Jeff, the Boston Consulting Group is not in the business of paying for other people's research. However, I'll look at this and I'll call you back in a week. Now, I'll call you back as code. You guys are experts at decoding consumers. This code is a simple code. I'll call you back as code for, I'm probably never going to call you back, right? Okay, well, I said thank you, and I hung up, not expecting to hear from her. And a week later, she called back. And she said, Jeff, you're right. Nobody's ever studied millennials as consumers. That's why you can't find anything on Google on the topic. We will do it, and we will pay for half of this. I did a happy dance, and in 2011, I published a piece of research called American Millennials Deciphering the Enigma Generation. If you have trouble sleeping tonight, which I will not have because it's the middle of the night, so I will have no trouble, but if you should have trouble, Google search American Millennials Deciphering the Enigma Generation. Listen, generations are not homogeneous cohorts. Gen Z is broken into several distinct cohorts, which I've written about, and you can read at barclayus.com. We have kids in middle school, kids in high school, kids in college, and we have kids who've graduated college. My son just turned 24. He's the oldest of Gen Z. He has a stable job, and he's not as affected by COVID. Someone who's graduating college right now might be terribly affected by COVID because they are unable to find work. So COVID is a big factor for all of us. It's particularly impacting this cohort. Now, you may feel like I'm still just a bit confused because I'm going to talk about Gen Z, and I'm going to talk about Gen Z through a mindset lens, not just a birth year lens. This fellow is clearly not in the birth years of Gen Z. He does, however, embody that Gen Z spirit of adventure. One of the things we found in our research was that this generation was what we would call old souls and young bodies, digital, social, and mobile to the core, but their values look much more like someone who's over the age of 50 than someone who might only be 28 or 30 years old. So they have values that look like people who are much older, but they're very, very digitally savvy. And just to kind of compare Gen Z, which is what I want to do here to start, millennials were known as collaborators. That's how we learned about millennials. Gen Z is very different. They're very focused on competition. Winning and losing are very much part of the vernacular, and they intend to work very hard for their money. And let me just add, money matters. We heard all kinds of myths about millennials. They're all broke and unemployed, living in their parents' basements among a collection of participation trophies they've never freaking earned. Not true. And Gen Z is absolutely interested in money. So don't believe any myths you might hear about Gen Z not caring about that topic. Millennials were the first generation to come of age during the era of social media, and they were pretty naive. They put a lot of things out there. Fortunately for me, social media did not exist when I was in college, or there would be incriminating photos that I would have posted. I didn't make the mistake because it wasn't an option. So Gen Z has seen this mistake made again and again, and you need to understand that their privacy and their data is not something they're going to share with you as a brand unless the quid pro quo is in their favor. So understand, data privacy is a big topic for Gen Z. It wasn't even something we discussed if you were older in the past. Data privacy, not something we considered. Millennials were known as sort of save the environment, and the environment's still a significant topic to Gen Z. But the topic that we wrote about a couple years ago that we're seeing a lot about today during COVID is the topic of equality and justice. And in our research a couple years ago, this was the topic we saw as the significant topic for brands to pay attention to. And let's be clear, and I will talk about the fact that brands need to pay attention to topics. If you're going to be successful in this horse racing and gambling sphere, cultural conversations will matter to your brand. Millennials were known for having fairly short attention span, and let's be honest, we all do, right? That's kind of the digital era we're in. Gen Z, however, has been criticized, and I think a bit unfairly, for having the attention span of what? Yes, the goldfish. And so that implies that you have all of a few seconds to capture their attention. And I will say, generally speaking, for consumers today, they really want small chunks of content that gain their attention. So that's a fast view of some comparisons between millennials, which you've likely heard a fair amount about, and Gen Z. I want to highlight 4 big trends we're seeing during COVID as it relates to Gen Z. These are macro trends that are going to be very important as you think about the strategies you might employ in your local market. The first one, I have a new puppy, and everyone at my house is thinking about training that new puppy. Gen Z is thinking about training their algorithm to get more of the content they want from the brands they love and to exclude things from their feed that they don't want. So they're not training dogs like we might if we had a puppy, but they are training algorithms, which is something to think about as you think about this cohort. Second, distrust, which is a massive topic, will impact your brand. And right now, there's a lot of distrust among this cohort. So if you're going to win them over, you're going to have to win their trust, which is hard. It takes brand action. You're going to have to think about this topic through marketing as a verb, and the actions the brand takes to earn their trust will be really important and will likely separate many of the winners from the losers in terms of their ability. And some of the brands that are large, like Facebook, have big hills to climb. There's increasing distrust of that brand. Third, 49% of Gen Z uses social media as a primary, full stop, news source, compared to 17% of older generations. This implies Gen Z is very much interested in their social feeds, which we've discussed already, and they use it both for entertainment and for what they would consider news. And fourth, a very big topic for you to think about, and that is neutral is a bad brand stance. And what I mean by that is on cultural topics, whether it's social justice, whether it's gun control, whether it's any topic you can imagine, there are topics your brand should not engage in, and then there are topics your brand should. So you have to think about what topics my brand has editorial authority over. And on those topics, within the ones that should be important to you, you have to have a stand. You have to take a stand. In the book that I will leave you at the end of this talk, I talk about the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. I would encourage you generally to think about those goals, but if you want an oversimplification for this, just think about what you learned in kindergarten. Be kind, leave the place a little cleaner, right? These are the kinds of things that they care about. And if I were to give you an example or two, I would say brands as large as Walmart, which historically had nothing to say on any topic. Basically, they were a no comment brand, now has significant commentary on all kinds of topics, and took ammo off their shelves prior to the elections in the US and did a number of other things. So even the most conservative brands that historically did not take a brand stance now understand doing nothing is a failing strategy in this country. I want to take a few minutes now that I've shared a little bit about the 4 key trends and show you some examples of some Gen Z activations. Now, these are ways that brands are activating the cohort, and I think it's important that you think of them more as a tactical example meant to inspire you. One brand that I have to call out is TikTok. This brand has done an excellent job of winning over Gen Z, and their superpower applies to all of us on this call, and that superpower is empathy. The empathy they show is very important, and that is part of the winning formula. I did an interview for Forbes with ESPN yesterday, and I asked them what the key to success was as far as their view toward winning this cohort, and her answer was the correct answer. It is empathy. So when prom was canceled for millions of Gen Zers, the younger part of this cohort that's still in high school, they created an opportunity for them to have a virtual prom, right? So empathy is a superpower that the best brands are using to win the cohort. And if you want to get a masterclass in tactics, go look at the things TikTok has done over the last 12 months, and you will see idea after idea of how to win the cohort. Second example is Thrivent. Now, Thrivent is a mature, iconic, conservative, traditional brand. Very, very different than TikTok. Thrivent hired us to put on a seminar we do called Marketing to Gen Z. It's a workshop style thing. It takes a couple weeks to prepare, and then we do an all-day virtual training. And then after that, they had us implement some ideas. And Thrivent is in the business of providing loans to college students. And one of the things they found in their research was college students did not understand the impact of taking out loans or the idea of compound interest. And rather than hide from this, they decided we need to take this head on and show people what this means so they can make the decisions that are right for them and not take on too much debt. This would be akin to sort of the topic of like responsible gambling. In other words, Thrivent saying, don't take on more than you should. I want to share this idea with you because I think it's so well done and something our team worked on.
So this is 4 years of college in ping pong balls. I'll be doing a BA in theater with a minor in musical theater.
I'm studying psychology. You can't ever really read people's minds, but it's as close as you can get to it.
I chose political science because I want to go to law school after I get my bachelor's.
I've loved math all my life, so it was natural to choose that.
I know that I have to take them out, and
You're borrowing money from, I guess, some unknown entity, and then you're going to have to eventually pay it back.
I know I'm going to be paying the government, but I'm not exactly sure how the whole payment process works.
What I do know is that I already owe a lot of money to a lot of different people. I feel like Houdini. Wait, this was one semester?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
this is gonna be me by the end of next year. Is this the 4 years, or are we not done yet?
We're not done yet.
I'll sleep outside.
I don't like this. There's more.
So personally,
personal expenses, laundry, travel, clothing, food, that sort of thing.
My face is itchy.
That was a lot. So it's 4 years of tuition and fees, books, and room and board. And then on top of all of that, you have a bucket full of interest.
What's the button do?
Let me get these out of here real quick.
Well, that's better.
That's so much better.
Glad that's gone. Being in the box was like, this is my debt.
I didn't think about interest debt. It's something that I am going to start thinking about.
Being able to click that red button and release all that stress.
I need a lot of red buttons in my life.
So the idea was to engage the cohort, and it was very successful because we spoke to them on their terms with real people. My third example is for a brand called Wingstop. It's a restaurant here in the US that's quick service, inexpensive. And we were doing social listening, as many of you probably do for your brands on an ongoing basis. And we were social listening, and the conversation was around 420. Now, I didn't know what 420 was at first. 420 is a holiday. It's not a Hallmark holiday. It's a holiday for Gen Zers who are getting stoned. And they were talking in March about the holiday that was coming up. And in the course of looking at the social conversations, we saw again and again, they were talking about how much they'd love to have Wingstop. Because when they get high, they want to have some food, and Wingstop serves these spicy and flavorful wings, and they thought it would be awesome. And so we're monitoring these conversations, and our client is what you would call ultra conservative. They're wearing, coats and ties to work, but they understand that their consumer is a 19-ish year old skews male college student. So even though they weren't celebrating 420, they understood that the consumer was celebrating 420. And so we brought them these videos. And the interesting thing about the videos is as the day goes on, the characters change just the way the people who are getting more and more stoned change. So let's take a peek.
Let's all go to the Wingstop. Let's all go to the Wingstop. Let's all go to the Wingstop to grab ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the Wingstop.
Keep it together, Cup. So hungry. Maybe just one fry. Whose voice is that?
Let's all go to the Wingstop. Let's all go to the Wingstop. Let's all go to the Wingstop to grab ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the just got back from the Wingstop. Just got.
So when we deployed each of these little videos in both paid and unpaid media, what we found was thousands of consumers who were partaking in 420, were sharing content from Wingstop among their friends, and it really became a viral phenomenon. And it was the brand's responsibility to help create that phenomenon by social listening. One of the myths that we'll hear about Gen Z is that they're disloyal. And I think that's a bad thing to listen to, because what it does is it gives marketing strategy professionals like me a chance to get a pass from doing our job. They are absolutely not disloyal. They're discerning. They trade up and down all the time. They spend money on the things that matter to them, and they save money and avoid things that don't. So don't fall into the trap of believing that. And what we saw in the research we were doing about Gen Z is they prefer brands whose values align to their own. They're looking for functional, emotional, and societal benefits. And when we think about functional, emotional, societal benefits, societal benefits would ladder back typically to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so as we think about that, one of the things we have to think about is our internal audience. And to the extent that you might have lots of employees, you have to make sure they love your brand more than anyone else. In the course of interviewing dozens of CEOs of very successful Gen Z brands, what I found again and again is they focus on creating an internal culture of passion for the brand, because you can't fake that. And let's face it, we live in a world today where I can go on Glassdoor, and if people say nasty things about the company, then nobody will believe what I say in my advertising. And so we have to think about programs that win over our internal audience. And we had a program we had at our office at Barclay, and it was a good program, and we still have it. It just didn't attract much interest. And it was this idea of bringing your kids to work. And so we had this program, it's called Bring Your Kids to Work Day. The challenge was we have a lot of employees who are sort of 30, 31, 32, and their kids like 1-year-old. So how awesome would it be if you had a 1-year-old and you're 30 and you're bringing the 1-year-old to work? It's like not very awesome. So we created a new program, not to eliminate that program, but that program was sort of not working. And that was called Bring Your Parents to Work Day. And let me take you to that program, which was a big hit with our internal audience.
I'm not sure why he chose advertising.
I think advertising chose him.
My husband laughs all the time. He said that she goes to work and does Facebook basically all day long. So,
and I'll say, what did you do today? And it usually just sounds like he's eating out or editing video.
If you walk through the door, there's always people sitting around the table. And then you got the main person up there pitching or whatever. And I'm thinking maybe he does some of that.
Can we revisit just the strategy first? You know, what led to taking this approach?
Has anybody ever experienced virtual reality?
Oh, you guys. Oh, Dick, you should see this, honestly. Oh my gosh, I'm falling.
Welcome, moms, to the Social Command Center at Barclay. I needed to grab some Wingstop. I heard it's on Fleet 100. Dank is like a term they use to say like this is a good high quality thing. And it comes from weed culture for that.
Oh, you're like it's dope, it's good, it's like whatever. Dang.
How heavily are you ingrained in the weed culture?
Not heavily. I just think the whole concept is crazy. Why not just email somebody, right? No.
Spirit Airlines, how can we make 4th of July themed email a little bit weird?
What about the founding mothers? You know, they never get mentioned.
Yes. So we've started to paint this picture. Our founding fathers are promiscuous fellows.
Oh, look at this. Oh, my word. Oh, I'm glad I went to the restroom.
No body hair. Some off of the legs a little bit. He's a pretty hairy guy. Some on the happy trail.
This is an easy one to wrap up. We have the founding fathers got around, and so can you. I think this is a solid email. I'm going to type it up so we don't forget it. I'm putting that in for July 4th.
There is an abundance of creativity. It just emanates from the walls of the place and from the people. And so I'm just tickled pink that I got to be here, and I hope I get a chance to come back again sometime.
I think the energy is amazing.
You know, for a mom to see her son, just to see him thrive in an environment is so rewarding.
I love knowing you all, knowing he's with people like you all. That's so cool.
I just know she's awesome, and that was just an affirmation. I learned that I'm really proud. I'm really glad that you're doing what you love with really cool people. Sorry.
You're making me cry.
So as each of us thinks about our efforts, make sure we don't forget that we have an important internal audience. I referenced how important purpose and sustainability are. I'm not going to be covering it at 24 minutes, but the link Purpose Book that you see at the bottom of the screen right there will take you to a copy that you can download for free that will go through both stories as well as a do-it-yourself workshop. So you can go through the exercise of looking at whether your brand is Gen Z ready. Thank you very much for including me. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And with a minute left, I'm turning it back.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. That was interesting. Stay with us. I'm pretty sure we have a couple of questions for you later on. Well, in horse racing and betting, we all know that Hong Kong is pretty in advance compared to the rest of the world. So that's why we're looking forward to hearing from Phoebe Siu now from the Hong Kong Jockey Club. Phoebe, tell us about your specific offer put in place by the Hong Kong Jockey Club, both online and offline.
Thank you. Let me share my screen first. Yeah, can you all see the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone from different parts of the world. My name is Phoebe Siu from the Hong Kong Jockey Club. The topic that I'm going to share with you today is Gen Z consumer profile and the ongoing research that we have done. To start with, Gen Z will account for around 10% of the Hong Kong Jockey Club active customer base in 2026. Gen Z will be an additional segment that the club has to focus on. As such, we start a strategic project in Hong Kong Jockey Club 2 to 3 years ago, which is about Gen Z research and understanding. This is the research approach and deliverables. The research divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 starts in 2019, which is about understanding of Gen Z. Phase 2 start in last year and completed just now, is on segmentation. For phase 3, it's about new experience feasibility studies. We plan to kick off in March of this year. The final output of the research will be an overall Gen Z strategy covering CRM, race course venue, OCBB, the off-course betting branches, customer digital experience, as well as new regional offer or bet type. In phase 1, we did comprehensive primary and secondary research in Hong Kong, covering 3,600 respondents, and another 2,000 respondents were included in phase 2 study for the segmentation. Here, I'm going to share about the key findings from our phase 1 and phase 2 research. In phase 1 research, we compare Gen Z versus Gen X and Gen Y, as what Jeff mentioned earlier. Gen Z is very much different from Gen X and Gen Y, but they also have some kind of similarities. To start with, we come up with a list of hypotheses for Gen Z, and the research results give us additional insights when comparing to Gen X and Gen Y. We find that Gen Z are more aware of social and supportive of social causes. However, they are empathetic when it comes to action. Gen Z have critical mindset, but they are not conformative on political matters. Gen Z value for money and are flexible to switch between possession and assets. They are willing to spend on experience. Gen Z are able to see through fake promotion, and fact check is a word or a term that they always use. Gen Z manage their online image with segregated social circles. They are willing to pay more for products that are personalized for them. Contrary to our expectation, Gen Z are very pragmatic, and they will look for the best deal in the market. They are also value for money. Gen Z are more aware of health concept and aware of environmental issues, yet they do not necessarily take actions. This is a quick summary of how Gen Z is different from Gen X and Gen Y. Then let's see Gen Z in details from value, consumption, entertainment, and the wagering perspective. Gen Z has their unique culture and values. In Hong Kong, Gen Z are pragmatic given the socio-economic development and education. They are we call a pessimistic generation. They are, very focused on what they are doing right now. Gen Z are better critical thinkers. They utilize the advantage of having diverse information sources. As said earlier, fact check has become one of their prerequisites while using social media. You can see here that 51% of the Gen Z will use social media to search for information, whereas the percentage is only 15% for Gen X and Gen Y. Gen Z are more socially conscious with little actionable differences, except on political stand. I think this is the same across the world in different countries. In terms of entertainment, mobile phone is their major entertainment platform. When we look into details on entertainment time allocation by activities, we can see that the first three is online video, social media, and shopping. In fact, Gen Z obtain all sorts of information through online video. In our research, we find that the most popular platform that Gen Z use is YouTube, which is a user-generated platform, as all know. And the second is Netflix, which is focused on on-demand video. For Gen Z, online video is the information hub to them, not only for entertainment, but also for education, learning, and stay connected with the rest of the world. And it's also echoed with what Jeff just mentioned earlier. Gen Z will look at social media to get all the information, including the news. Social media means more than networking to Gen Z. Information on the social media will shape their spending and entertainment preference. But Gen Z use a wide range of social media with a differentiated social circle for each platform. Just take an example. For Instagram, Gen Z will actively manage with separate accounts for their close friends. But for Facebook, they will only passively manage. For passively manage, it means that they will only get information or look for information in Facebook, but they will never share their information or they will never post new information in their Facebook account. Besides staying connecting with their friends, social media has become a major platform for them to get the latest trend as well. For consumption and lifestyle, Gen Z use online and offline channels for different purposes, but offline experience is still very important to Gen Z. Contrary to our expectation, the percentage that Gen Z spend in online shopping is actually lesser than Gen Y. Gen Z still treasure offline experience because they think that offline experience can give them value added that shopping online cannot offer. When it comes to gaming and sports, bonding with friends is crucial for Gen Z. The key word here is watching it live and watching with friends and families. Being fear of missing out, Gen Z tends to play games that are popular among peers, especially those allow multiplayers or competing between friends. You will see that multiplayer is very popular games when compared with single player games among Gen Z. For wagering, we find that Gen Z is a more open-minded generation when compared with Gen X and Gen Y. When we ask about the perception on wagering, 83% of them will weight strongly positive or neutral towards wagering. This figure is very much different from Gen X and Gen Y. After a quick understanding of the phase 1 and phase 2 study information, we will focus on how the segmentation that we comes up in our phase 2 research. Coming up with the segmentation model, we find that both psychographic and demographics matters. In demographic, quality of education received is directly correlated to wagering amount per month per better. Similarly, in psychographic, degree of risk loving also have direct relationship with wagering instincts. With psychographic and demographic in mind, it then comes up with our Gen Z segmentation model, which I try to describe in more simple terms here. We put psychographic in x-axis and we choose risk tolerance level as the key psychographic here. From the left-hand side to right-hand side are different segments that we identified. On the left-hand side are the explorer and enthusiastic. You can see that this group of peoples, they will take calculated risk and they will back socially. They also believe wagering is about skills and they will seek for novelty and physical enjoyment. Whereas on the far right-hand side are the curious and the observer. These segments are anti-risk. They believe wagering is about luck and they will rather stay in their comfort zone rather than go out to take risk. Next, we put demographic in y-axis and we choose household income level as the key differentiator here. Household income level will affect Gen Z entertainment option. By having psychographic on the x-axis and demographic on the y-axis, it then comes up with the 6 segment we identified here, which is explorer, enthusiastic, goal seeker, team player, the curious, and the observer. You can see that for both explorer and enthusiastic, this group of people, they prefer to attend live event. That is their similarity. But because of purchasing power, explorer will more focus in looking for uniqueness in restaurant, whereas for the enthusiastic, they will rather spend their money in in-game purchases. For goal seeker and team player, both of them use social media a lot, but they use social media differently as well. Goal seeker use social media to connect with their friends and organize events, right? Whereas for team player, they use social media to express emotion. On the right-hand side are the curious and the observer. Both of them are the quiet segment. They like to play game card, but the differences is that the curious will visit offline store for pop-up store and they will pick restaurant for trendiest, as for the observer, because of relatively low household income, they will rather spend their time in online video and they would like to play single player game. Finally, we also do some analysis in terms of male and female. We find that male bettors still dominating, but to a lesser extent when compared with Gen X and Gen Y. After we look at the key wagering indicator, we decided to focus on 4 segments with highest potential and highest score. The segment that we identified is the one that we highlight here, that is explorer, enthusiastic, goal seeker, and team player. They already covered 70% of the total Gen Z population. As such, we will develop the hot pattern based on their entertainment preferences. This section, I will go into more details about the hot buttons that we identified. In terms of hot buttons, we means tools that help us to activate the Gen Z or how to make Gen Z interested in the racing game. We come up with some initial ideas and will have feasibility in our common research to test against the feasibility. We find that Gen Z strategy should come from 4 different dimensions, including physical, digital, marketing, and bet type. This hot button should be holistic, interconnected with immersive, providing an all-round experience for the Gen Z betting novice. Physical hot buttons cover Gen Z experience store and race courses. It aimed at offering unique offline experience to them. Here are only some initial ideas that we come up with. For in Gen Z Experience Store, there are ideas like the store should have to carry interactive features like VR and AR, eSport arena, crane machine, interactive visual walls, or we have other kind of retail format like the merge format, of course, betting bunches. In race courses, some of the ideas that we come up is pop-up market with monthly rotational theme, food tour style catering venues and small individual restaurant. Some of the setting may take reference to co-working space area for interaction between customers. For marketing, we believe that the marketing channel should align with Gen Z's social media interests. In the marketing tactics, some of the ideas that we are exploring include engage in influencer marketing and user-generated content, or we can develop some racing related video or documentary in Netflix, which actually Formula One we're doing right now. We can also explore some endorsed Hong Kong Jockey Cup theme or scheme in mainstream games like Animal Crossing or Minecraft. We aim at penetrate Hong Kong Jockey Cup, or we aim at penetrate racing in their daily life. In terms of branding, it's more on social awareness. Some of the ideas that we come up include focus on animal rights or allow bettors to select the beneficiary of their lost wages. To enhance existing digital platform, some of the ideas include tailored UI for individual users, introduce online chat room or social networking features in our app, create leaderboard for the customer to interact with each others, and enable voice recognition into our app design so that the customer can place bet with their mobile assistant more easily. Finally, we will explore new betting product for the racing novice customers. Some of the ideas that we come up with, including head-to-head betting, fantasy style product, which allow players to build their own stable and compete with other players, subscription model betting, as well as contextual live betting. All the hot buttons that I shared earlier will be tested in our phase 2 research. We will shortlist the potential hot buttons around feasibility studies and then map the hot buttons with Gen Z segments identified based on their relevancy and feasibility. As shared earlier, the phase 3 research will be kicked off in March of this year. Maybe after the research, I can have another chance to share with all you guys here about the research findings. That's the end of my presentation, and thanks for your time.
Sorry, Kirsten, I think you're on mute there. Oh, she must have missed me. Well, I'll get set up here. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen from FanDuel. As mentioned earlier, my accent isn't American. I'm from Dublin. I've been over here in the US for a couple of years. Well, more than a couple of years, almost a decade, working with FanDuel's legacy brand TVG and also FanDuel as well, and FanDuel Racing. And I'm going to talk about what we've been doing in particular in the past year or so and how that's bleeding into FanDuel's overall approach to Gen Z and how we're adapting our product towards it. A couple of things I'll talk about first is exactly who FanDuel are right now, and Flutter, our parent company. There needs to be just sort of an update because lots of changes in the US market. There'll be a few caveats as well. I'm going to be mixing in some of my own opinion here, so it's not necessarily just all the companies. And then we'll go more into detail in terms of Gen Z and FanDuel Racing, how we've placed racing as a cross-sell product, how we as a whole, as a group in the US, are trying to attract, and some of the approaches that we're looking at. And then my area in particular, as I look after product for racing, is how we're building for a product for the future. Exactly who is FanDuel in the US? We're a subsidiary of Flutter, who previously been known as Paddy Power Betfair. We operate a multitude of brands in the US, primarily FanDuel being our biggest leading brand. But the company was formed in 2018 when Flutter acquired FanDuel. And as part of Flutter and / Paddy Power Betfair acquiring FanDuel, we brought in our legacy brands, which would have been Betfair Casino and TVG in particular, which you guys I'm sure are all pretty aware of. Racing is a key pillar and differentiator across the major online gaming brands as this whole market evolves very, very quickly in the US. And TVG has been real standout performer for us. It was obviously established a lot earlier than FanDuel itself. It started in 1999. And right now we're the #1 ADW, or online horse racing betting platform in the US. We operate in approximately 33 states. You can see on the right-hand side here just the state map where we operate and where ADW is available. And just last year, we launched a new brand called FanDuel Racing, which was a reskin of our back end, but a new approach to how to engage and address the big audience that we had with our daily fantasy players in FanDuel and also the emerging sportsbook market. How TVG got to #1 and also why racing is such a good product really relies down on video and vision. It's such an immersive, rich video product, and that's where TVG has leveraged and focused on. We don't own any other tracks like some of our competitors do. So we've got two racing channels that air on traditional cable providers, they're called over here, and that's really been a key driver for our building our brand and our acquisition. And we're across all the major cable providers, and kind of now what we've been focusing on is ensuring that the distribution of racing is spread out across into the new emerging technology platforms. In 2017, we launched an OTT product, which allows you to download the TVG app on Apple TV, Fire Stick, and Roku. And we've been adding to new streaming providers such as YouTube TV and Fubo TV. There's been a lot of change, and I just kind of have to address it in terms of the US betting industry recently. Starting off that, effectively the online horse racing industry has had a monopoly since up until 2018, but unfortunately handle and overall volume from both online and in particular retail has effectively stagnated, and this came after the 2008 crash, which also impacted foal crop and ultimately has impacted field size. So it's been a challenging time for the industry. What's happened overall in the US gaming industry in 2018 has been the repeal of PASPA, which now, as you guys are pretty much aware of, has allowed for the expansion of online sports betting. And in January, that happened in January. In June, FanDuel was acquired by Paddy Power Betfair, now Flutter, and very quickly by September, we were taking online sportsbook bets in New Jersey. Really how I see it, going into 2020 now in this new decade, racing's at an inflection point where we have the opportunity to engage a new generation, because online sportsbooks are spending heavily to acquire effectively a missed generation, and I'll get a little bit more into that in the future. But now we're sitting at a point where 25% of the US population are in states which can wager on online sports betting, and Gen Z, as kind of talked about by Jeff, is the first generation over here who've been immersed in social, but also they're going to be the first generation who've had wagering and online gambling options fully marketed to them and available legally in a lot of states. So now looking in terms of what we're doing within the FanDuel group, I'll go into talking about how our cross-sell strategy, which we call More Ways to Win, attracting and engaging the Gen Z, and then building a product for Generation Z, and talk about what we've done and what we're looking at there. Again, our racing product, it wasn't specifically called out to be designed for Gen Z. You know, we've taken some approaches, and I'll talk about that. Also, it's important to note that in the US and the vast majority of states, online gaming is only available to 21 plus. So we're talking really about a 3-4 year of these players being accessible. And I'll just caveat, like everyone's Twitter profile, most of these thoughts are my own, so don't tell my bosses. Growing engagement in Gen Z. We've seen, because we're investing quite heavily in acquiring sportsbook. FanDuel is a group in the US. That's a massive growth area, hundreds of thousands of customers, rapidly growing, and has a strong interest and strong momentum. And what we're trying to do is place racing as a cross-sell product. And it's a great cross-sell product because of its frequency of races across the world. We're very lucky with partners that we have on this call, and that we're able to practically offer 24/7 racing, which up against other markets, such as like an NFL game, which can take 4 hours, probably in about 2 weeks for the Super Bowl. So there's a lot of product, a lot of speed, and a lot of great video and content accessible. What we did in early 2020 was launch FanDuel Racing, and we took a different approach. We wanted to reflect that we're talking to a sportsbook base, a daily fantasy base, so millions of players there. And Daily Fantasy had 8 million players on their books, with about half of those addressable in states that we could market to. We wanted to turn around and like make no assumptions. You know, I've been working in the industry for a long time. I have a lot of inbred assumptions when it comes to designing the product. So we really tried to break those down and research with customers to assume nothing. Focus heavily on video. So like it's from simple things like autoplay and just making sure people were aware that video was available. In our research, that wasn't clear to customers that you could watch horse racing, and when they found out, they were almost like, "Why don't you tell me about this?" And then what was very interesting in this product as well was it gave you an opportunity as a product manager to rethink things and look at try new things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do in a legacy brand like TVG, because you're worried about impacting your key accounts or the different base. One of the main objectives really was how we felt was when we were partnering up with this newly formed company in FanDuel, was we were bringing back racing back in from the cold. And when we looked at the numbers, it kind of became clear that like racing in the US missed a generation. I know we're talking about Gen Z a lot here, primarily, but horse racing, and if you take the view that like TVG is making up a significant portion of the recreational base in the US, that as a proxy, we'd really missed out millennials. And in particular now, when we've got 3-4 years of data from Gen Z, we're falling behind there too. And what we found in our research was when we were signing up these customers who were marketing to in the FanDuel base, 50% of them didn't even know that horse racing was legal in their state. So we clearly weren't talking to them correctly. So this is really a massive opportunity for us. We've seen how sportsbook, and a massive opportunity for US racing. We've seen how sportsbook now only live just over 2 years. Its volume is now 3x what a thoroughbred racing is in the US. And we're seeing that like because of the spend, and I'll go into this a little bit more in the channels, that like FanDuel is actually, the sportsbook is acquiring quite a good percentage as Gen Z as a reflection of the US population. So they're spending and acquiring in this area, and we need to have racing in there too, and particularly in the shop window. So when I speak to my counterparts and look at what we're doing, we've taken a different approach from how certainly TVG would have been marketing to, but there's been a massive increase in investing in new channels. Obviously, we do the the basics in terms of TV and online, but really we're starting to focus heavily more on influencer and spokesperson, in particular in the area of YouTube. And just recently, with signing of Dr. Disrespect, one of the top 5 Twitch, well, was on Twitch, but now has moved to YouTube, influencers from a gaming side. We've done a lot of partnering with different sports content producers, from ex-players to people who were just making a name for themselves in social, in terms of producing content and talking and trying to engage fans about sports betting. And what I found very interesting over here is with this new generation and focus on these new channels, is you're not frightened to talk complex problems like sports betting in the US, especially the odds. It's not straightforward. There's a lot of numbers, a lot of opinion, and they're not shy of actually of addressing that, which I found quite interesting. Also, there's been a complete sort of renovation of retail experiences. Phoebe was talking about Hong Kong there. We've seen with FanDuel has invested quite heavily in our retail sports books all across the US, in particular in the Meadowlands, and customers are going in and spending their whole entire day to enjoy their gaming experience there. And compare that with what sports books were 2, 3, 5 years ago in Vegas. They're now having to raise their game because they're not on par. And so how this falls into racing is we're being able to now leverage these assets, and in particular these influencers, where we're placing our content in relation to racing around the tentpole events and getting these guys, because we've got these deals with FanDuel, to be able to promote horse racing, not just for the Kentucky Derby, but for other major events, Breeders' Cup, when it's at the right time, and bring in this new audience. Jeff talked about it, and so did Phoebe, in terms of where, you know, the interests and important items for Gen Z. And I think it's hard to ignore the fact that, particularly in the US market, that Gen Z are clearly price conscious, but also that they're willing to research other options, using almost 50% of their news from social. So they're going out and looking on social, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, in terms of where, you know, validating their assumptions. And right now, racing in the US needs to put itself forward in terms of price. I have to applaud our partners, ATG, recently for adjusting their takeouts in the face of competition, and how they're placing themselves in their market in Scandinavia. And also, we need to look at focusing more on revenue. I know I've mentioned handle myself earlier in this, but what are we actually getting? And the focus, particularly in the US, on handle is it's a damaging trend, because it's ultimately how much money you're making off the customer that's going to impact, not the churn. So US is really at the crossroads when it comes to the sportsbook expansion. You know, the Tote is quite prohibitive takeouts on a lot of wagers, and this is really exposed when it's put side by side with sportsbook. There's a big focus as well in terms of marketing in US racing towards these jackpot type wagers, which can have a 60-70% effective takeout rate on the day. And I take a sample here just from earlier this week with the top carryover pools again, and it's promoting a wager that's effectively killing churn and becoming unattainable for most people. And when Jeff was talking about equality, it just reminded me as well, as a focus for Gen Z, that the rebate culture that exists is not necessarily equal. Everyone isn't treated equal within the racing ecosystem. So this can be somewhat off-putting for a newer generation. So how's FanDuel and what's happening in the US market in terms of attracting and interesting this Gen Z? And free-to-play has been a key part of that. Free-to-play obviously isn't new. It's been going on, you know, pioneered primarily by Skybet, who's now joined the Flutter Group over the past 5 or 6 years, and a key part of their growth in the UK. It's been successful in Australia, but it's really clicked up another gear in the US. And it's giving customers the opportunity to try before you buy, but I think it's important for racing as well, because it gives us the ability to try new things without ultimately damaging our core product and our core existing group and the other generations. On the left-hand side here, you can see just a couple of images how FoxBet, another Flutter brand, FanDuel brand in the US, who came in from the Stars group, have been really successful with almost over 2 million downloads in the US App Store alone, and have been doing really well from being topical, being able to like focus on the presidential debates that were happening and having like over 500,000 people participate in doing free to play. Key to this is obviously its connection with Fox and the TV network, but it's really built up a player base which we're able to cross sell to. For racing, it's an opportunity to try different things. One item that we've tried is Cash Keeper, which is a game where you start off with $1,000 and you're challenged with 10 questions, which are effectively win, play, show questions, but we've turned it around in a different sort of style to make it a little bit more digestible. And the fact that you're giving the people the money first has really sort of engaged the base. And we were seeing like over 40% of actives on some days of wagering actives participate in this, and it was a good way to teach people how to to try new different types of bets, but obviously not we're not spending so much. And then also Super X. So you see like FoxBet have Super 6. We've had TVG Super 8. These have been very popular on Saturdays and Sundays, just giving someone a way to play. Again, around the sort of 35–40% of our actives can engage in this, and was significant in terms of acquisition driver. So in terms of building a racing product for Gen Z, one thing, again, Jeff mentioned it today about sustainability, and at Flutter and FanDuel in particular, we ultimately have to be more responsible with our customers, and we need to lead from the front in terms of responsible gaming. We've tried to do that, and we're continuing to do it. We must do better, especially for this new generation, because they expect it from us. And you'll see if you go on to the TVG and FanDuel racing products that responsible gaming isn't just a bookmark hidden away and in the more section. We're putting it there at the right times in our marketing positions, P1, P2 positions. And in 2020, we launched the first, you can see just some samples there on the right-hand side. We were the first ADW to launch quite a comprehensive plan rather than just basic opt-outs, but the ability to manage your deposits, limits, and your play. And we're really going to be expanding on that into 2021 with more above the line and below the line targeting and predictive analysis of trying to identify and ensure that customers are betting responsibly and ultimately sustainably. Again, I'm a product person, was originally marketing, but now moved into product. And there's a lot of, when you look at trying to build for a new generation, you have to make some tough choices. And in particular for businesses, the ability they get asked all the time with their tech stack, do we buy or build? And agility and scalability, especially for this new generation, is key. For example, at FanDuel Racing, it was an idea for a few months, but once we got sign off, we went from 6 months to rolling out a new brand based off our existing technology, and it was very important. We wouldn't have been able to do it and capture a new audience without making the investments that we've done over the previous 2 or 3 years to be able to do that. In terms of product management style also, lean UX is quite common in product. That we've taken this approach to everything that we do, but on focusing on an MVP, it's very important that building a team and getting the unity and agreeing an MVP to get it out quickly and to listen and respond to your customers, while at the same time having an ultimate vision where you want to get to. But your customers are going to dictate that. And placing the right infrastructural bets, it can be quite hard with the challenges such as Apple are putting in terms of keeping things native in the App Store and Play Store in terms of legalities. But one thing that we've again been investing in and making in our infrastructure is on ease of use, and in particular for Tote, like the cycle of odds, getting the information is quick to customers. 15 seconds. Steph pointed out, like, he jokes about the 8 seconds lifespan. Odds can take 30 seconds on some websites to update. That's not good enough. The video latency, 30, 40 in the US, it was like almost 60 seconds for video latency. Again, that's not good enough, and we've been making investments on that. So just kind of getting near the end, so I'm going to wrap up with a couple of examples of things that we've been doing in terms of an investment was on how we're getting the TVG broadcast out there. And we originally with OTT, we bought a product off the shelf, but we saw the opportunity that as we were getting bigger and also as technology was advancing, that we really needed to go beyond just buying a product off someone and actually future-proof ourselves. And so we've been able to evolve our OTT product, and now a customer, and you'll see it here in a moment, can actually integrate and personalize with their own bets. So when they start placing bets on their phone, it starts appearing on the TV, which is very important when you're doing complex wagers such as like trifectas and exactas, and wondering, did your horse come in third and what exactly did you have? It also has allowed us, because we have a TV network, to have disposable channels that are more event-based, and we can test and learn and try different things. In particular, and you'll see this now, is how we tested with the Breeders' Cup. They partnered up to install jockey cams, which have been used throughout the world. But what was, I think, quite important on our OTT product here is that the customers could be able to switch between the different platforms. You'll see here the wagers are on the right hand side of the customer, what they've placed on this race. They can keep that up or they can hide it, and now they can go and explore and see and join on the jockey, still hearing the commentators. And here this horse is sitting in third. So this is just an example. It was our first step in it, and we're working with our track partners to see where we can roll this out and how ultimately we can improve the experience for the customer. Another, as part of Flutter, we actually have an emerging technology group who are based primarily in the UK and Ireland. It's a dedicated team who are examining different trends that are happening, both from a strategic side and technology side, just searching and learning. And one of these items that came up, and I thought it was quite interesting, especially as we've going into COVID, and certainly the retail environment in the US has kind of migrated online. We're examining different options here, but going back to sort of talking about horse racing, I think it's an excellent product to work from this type of front. And this was a sample from a company. They built this for us, and we were again looking at it, but it's the ability for customers to set up a watch party with their friends, have the content being played. Again, we're looking at TVG. We're able to share our partners' content, and thinking about ways of how we can get horse racing and the betting on this front, and to allow customers to be social. And again, going back to Twitch, this is bog standard, but obviously pretty new for horse racing. So just wrapping up, racing product for Generation Z, like our core fundamentals are pretty strong as a product for racing. The speed of payout, the frequency of races, we're in a good position there. Also, like video is really, really important for this generation and all generations. But the fact that technology is caught up in terms of latency and speed and quality, especially in terms of 5G, it only gets stronger. The video versus, particularly in the US, video rights are freely available when you do the versus other leagues. So it actually puts horse racing as an advantage there, that we can get content and video content in front of the customers a lot quicker, and they don't have to go search elsewhere to align it to sort of dual screen with their sports wagering experience. And accessibility to the athletes and trainers is really strong, which is a huge advantage. And they're quite a diverse bunch too. In terms of pools betting, priced right, I think it's extremely powerful. And it's been interesting seeing other companies investing in different types of partnership wagers, friends wagering, also cash out, and also fractional to make it more accessible, especially when you get into the larger pool wagers. And also what's emerging in the US, which I think is quite interesting, and it's probably a little bit more commonplace in other areas, particularly in Ireland, but micro ownership, because again, racing has the opportunity to actually get the sports fan and the wager a lot closer to ownership, which is not attainable in other sports, and it adds a whole new dynamic. So it's something, an area that we're looking at and trying to sort of break down the barriers over here in the US and getting customers closer to that front. So that's pretty much it for myself. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you, Stephen, for your presentations. It was very interesting. Feel free to ask any questions you have, all of you listening. I heard that Gisela from the Hong Kong Jockey Club raised her hand, so maybe we can unmute her mic and start with the Q&A.
No, sorry.
Well, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Sorry, I just pressed wrongly. It's okay.
Okay. Well, I will start. This question can be for both Phoebe and Stephen. How do you use, well, do you use the service of social influencers? How do you use it? And how important are they for your communication?
Okay, it's Phoebe here. Currently, we are more focusing on more focus in targeting Gen Y in our market, and we do use social influencer or many like say KOL or micro influencer in some of our campaign. But normally the way we use is we won't engage a social influencer in a very long period, because there are always risks with those social influencers. We will use them on ad hoc basis according to campaign or according to different place, different venue or different events that we organize. Some of the social influencer or KOL that we have been deployed are those they're actively in games, or some of them we will also deploy some very lifestyle influencer. We will use them to try to experience racing and using their first-hand experience, and then they will report their experience to their group of influencer. That's the way that we did in Hong Kong. And Stephen?
Yeah, so it's kind of different depending on the brand that we use. So with TVG, we, I suppose, have been an influencer in terms of wagering because of the TV network for so long, obviously giving picks. And as social has expanded, we've ensured that all our talent are prominently engaged on social and building up their base. And that again talks to probably the TVG base more than the emerging Gen Z generation. And then looking at FanDuel, it's been a key focus in terms of engaging the younger generation. I mentioned a couple of the guys earlier who we've been focusing on with influencers, particularly Pat McAfee, Dr. Disrespect in the future. That it's a real partnership that we try to build and use these partnerships to engage their active base and their base there. I will say as well, taking a step back and looking wider as well within the competitive space, we used to engage with brands such as Barstool Sports, but now content and influence has become so important that these big influencers and content producers are now actually, launching sportsbooks themselves. In the case with Barstool Sports, they've been sort of acquired by Penn to be used as a vehicle to launch their sportsbook in Barstool Sports, which kind of came out a few months ago.
I have another question for you, Stephen, from a spectator of the webinar. Do you feel that there's a risk in the US that sports betting could wipe out betting on horse racing?
Wipe out is a very strong word. I wouldn't say a phrase. I wouldn't say that. I think racing could get left behind if it isn't willing to adapt. It will continue to exist, but we're seeing that, and I hope what was kind of clear in my presentation is we have to ensure that racing's in the shop window. So having it sitting outside the sports betting marketplace where there's investment in getting in every generation. It's like the budgets are absolutely huge, and of which horse racing in the US has never invested heavily and above the line and below the line marketing. It's kind of just sat there expecting people to sort of, because their granddad brought them to the track, they would go to the track. Yeah, it needs to be in the shop front, and that's what we're trying to do at FanDuel, of ensuring that racing is where the investment is and where the eyeballs ultimately are.
At FanDuel, how do you try to appeal to your Gen Z esport players with horse racing?
Yeah, so again, it's quite sort of with horse racing, we really haven't got so far into it, and I think looking at different technologies such as watch parties, such as how we distribute video, and also the race data itself, how horse racing, how it's produced in particular, like the track feeds, has been the same as it is for 30 years, but now we've got a new generation who can not dual screen, but use up to 5 screens or 5 devices at the same time. You turn on, Fortnite and look at how data is presented on those games. There's so much avenue to include more data and more more screens explaining stuff to customers, and so that's why we made an infrastructural bet in terms of OTT, but now we have the platform to be able to test that, and it's something we will be looking over the next sort of 2 or 3 years to not, we wouldn't damage the core horse racing base at TVG and reinvent our whole entire graphics package. But just last weekend, we did a completely new graphics package for the Pegasus Cup, which was targeted at FanDuel racing customers. A TVG customer probably never even heard or saw of it, but it was we were going to using our infrastructural bet on OTT and our process flow to be able to do something completely new, make a disposable channel, and we'll go back out and see how our customers engage with it in the future and take learnings from it.
Thank you. I have a question for Jeff. As we said, Gen Z is interested in gaming, but they tend to not really like taking risks. So do you think they're critical towards gambling because they believe that might be, risky behavior?
I think it's probably something to reframe more around entertainment and how much entertainment value they get from this versus probably indirect alternatives. So I think if I was working in the industry, I'd probably be more interested in how we compete versus indirect alternatives. I don't think, that's probably the way I'd frame it. On the riskiness scale, they probably aren't as a cohort as risky as millennials were. That's the comment I made about old souls and young bodies from our research. Having said that, if they're thinking about it through an entertainment lens, then it's like, okay, what I've heard in our research is, well, I plan to sort of go to a casino or do whatever, and I'm going to spend my $100 and I'm going to have a lot of fun. And they're not thinking about like this is an income source or something like that.
When we give them good customer experience, as we talked about with Phoebe, do you think their loyalty towards racing increases? You were talking about loyalty in your presentation as well.
Yeah, the point I made in my presentation was 2 factors going on. First of all, in the chat, there's some commentary around trust. Right now, there's a tremendous erosion of trust. So you have to look at that through your brand level and say, what do we have to do to earn trust, which is usually through action. At the same time, the loyalty myth, and I say myth because the consumer is a day trader. They pay more for brands they want, and they save money on brands they don't. So it's not that they're disloyal. They are making decisions using digital technology oftentimes, and they trade up and down. I can literally find, if I'm a Gen Zer, I can find a restaurant on my way to the track from my mobile phone while I'm in my Uber, right? I mean, that is, and I can crowdsource it from ratings and reviews and friends. And honestly, what happens is we see this migrate to older consumers. So I needed a movie to watch the other night. So having seen young people do this, I literally went to Facebook and said, anyone seen some great movies lately? I need something for tonight. I got 60 suggestions. from people in my Facebook feed and why they like the movie. 60. That's a Gen Z sort of behavior, you know, an old dude applied, because they're influencing culture. And that is very important for all of us to think about, because Gen Z will be the canary in the coal mine when it comes to racing and gambling in terms of the trends. They'll be the early adopters that affect the mass market of consumers that we are serving. Okay?
Yeah. There's another question for you here. So, Jeff, you said that organizations can't be neutral, but it must be difficult to go sometimes against the majority, let's say on social media. What if, what can you do if the choices you make as an organization are wrong, or
So,
not the best?
Well, first of all, the goal isn't to make the wrong choice, but if you make it, own it. Second, you don't wait till the crisis du jour starts to come up with your editorial authority. You have a planning session way ahead of time, and you say, these are conversations that matter to our brand, and these are conversations that don't. And so when I reference Walmart, which is a conservative, stodgy sort of brand to most people, you know, they came out with points of view on topics that were hot button topics. We expect that from Ben & Jerry's. We expect that from Nike. We don't expect that from Walmart historically. And so what that suggests is very clear. More and more large brands are thinking about their editorial authority. They're thinking about their internal audience. Walmart's CEO knows employees were upset about safety. And so they're listening to that internal chat, that internal audience. They took a point of view externally that was as important to external people as it was to that internal audience. And so this is the kind of thing you have to do some planning and strategy work around to understand these are topics we're going to have a point of view. And again, don't wait till the crisis du jour starts to have that point of view.
Well, thank you. I have a question for both Phoebe and Stephen. How do the different betting types, bet types, appeal to the different generation groups?
This is a difficult question. Actually, that's one of the area that we are going to study in our phase 3 research. But from our earlier finding with the Gen Z, from those focus group, many Gen Z told us that racing is very difficult. They don't understand. They don't understand how to read the odds. They don't understand the rule of the games. They don't understand lots of the things, and that's one of the reasons that hinder them to participate in this game. So our initial finding is that for Gen Z, seems they are more appeal to simple bet type. Easy to understand, simple. They don't expect they will win a lot of the money, but they would like to have some kind of winning experience at least. Yeah, that is the initial finding that we have from those research, and definitely we will try to understand more from the Gen Z in our coming phase of research. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What about you, Stephen?
Yeah, I was actually just looking at this yesterday from because we released a new way to sort of do win-play show betting on FanDuel Racing a couple of months ago to see the impact on bet count. And when we look at FanDuel Racing customers versus TVG, not breaking it down by any specific age category, but knowing that FanDuel Racing skews younger, yeah, simple bet types, win-play show would be like 5 or 6% as percentage points basis more popular on FanDuel Racing than TVG. And while a TVG customer would probably spend or do in terms of the bets, 10% will be around sort of the pick threes and ups. It's very low single-digit percentage for FanDuel Racing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I have a question too. Well, here in France, the Prix d'Amérique is coming up on Sunday. It's the biggest race of the year. For the first time in France, we can bet anti-post betting. So I think that's very interesting for this generation. But what about betting live? There's one big emerging company now. You don't really know what the pools are when you place your bet, so we don't know how much you can win. How important do you think the planning is for Generation Z? Stephen and maybe Jeff too. and how important is the anticipation of the eventual winnings?
Well, I think the eventual winnings is kind of, a key driver in terms of what someone wants to, why they bet. I think and we try and highlight that as well in terms of, odds complexity, fractional odds. Fractional odds aren't very Gen Z in the US. I'm not sure decimals are. Decimals never really taken off in the US, even though I'm still trying with decimals and Celsius over here. But looking at live betting in pools, I really think it's quite difficult to deliver a product there. And obviously, Betfair, where I originally came from, sort of pioneered the in-play betting side. But it's hard for a customer. Phoebe mentioned Gen Z is saying that they find horse racing and bet types quite confusing. Tote, it's not being able to know exactly what you're going to win, and in particular it being fluctuating a hell of a lot with pool betting and live from an in-play experience. I think that's adding quite a complex level, and it's probably best left to fixed odds or exchange wagering in that front. And it has been something that Paddy Power in particular as a brand in the UK has focused quite heavily on in the past 3-4 years, of providing fixed odds in-play wagering, because people still want to bet. And obviously back home, we're betting on races that are 5 to 10 minutes long when it's national hunt jump season. So in-play betting suits a little bit more there than a 6 furlong route, 6 furlong sprint race over here in the US, which is done in less than a minute.
Yeah, so I guess transparency is very important for that. And I have a question for Phoebe. Ethical policy in the Hong Kong Jockey Club and the racing in Hong Kong, do you think that's an asset to attract Generation Z?
Yeah, we stress very much on responsible gambling policy. Though in Hong Kong, all age 18 or above can bet and open a betting account, but normally in terms of our marketing promotion, we will only target those age above 21. And because we will also take this as very strict line in our company. And in here, we only allow all the customers to bet on cash. They can't bet on credit. They can't bet on they can't bet on others. They must have the money in their account before they can bet. So and we think that we also focus a lot on charity here. The money that they wager, actually a lot of the percentage go to the charities in Hong Kong. We think all these because for Gen Z, brand purpose is very important to them. We think that that is actually an asset that we may be right on when we try to package the marketing strategy for the Gen Z.
I have a question from Mehdi El Alawi in Morocco. He says to engage Gen Z cohorts in digital horse betting interactions, trust is must. How can we overcome a lack of trust towards online horse betting? Maybe Jeff can participate in this question about trust in Gen Z and horse betting.
First of all, I don't know in Morocco if you've done research to understand what the trust gap is and why it's there, and understanding what it is and why it's there would probably be important. After you've done the research and understand it, generally speaking, you need to focus on the actions your brand is going to take, not messaging. And where large brands often fail is they focus on the messages they want to send in marketing as opposed to the actions. So brand action will be really important. And don't forget, you have audiences outside and inside the company. You can't typically win with consumers outside the company if you can't win inside. And brands like Ben & Jerry's and Nike and TikTok and these brands, they have avid fans inside and outside their organizations.
Thank you, Jeff. Does anyone else have any questions for our 3 panelists? Oh, well, maybe.
Wow.
it's a wrap for this time. Thank you all for joining us for the second webinar of the World Tote Association. Thank you for your very interesting presentations, for your questions, and for listening to all of us. So yeah, see you next time.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.